Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome so much to Sunday Night History Chat. Hope everybody is doing really well. My name is Michael C. Hardy. We are hanging out this evening in my library here in Western North Carolina, usually where you find us on Sunday Night History Chat. A lot going on. It's May 5th, 2024. I hope everybody is doing really well. I don't see anybody showing up yet. But that says I'm live. You know, technology is really cool
We got about 3 or 4 people.
when it works. And I guess we're working this evening. Now I see people popping in. Joshua and David and Robert and Jason. Hope everybody is doing really well this evening. It is a beautiful evening here in the mountains of Western North Carolina. And we are excuse me, just having a great time. Many of you all saw that we were off the mountain yesterday in Greensboro and had a great time down there. My first visit to UNC Greensboro's campus, and did a little walking around. Of course, we were there for the North Carolina National History Day competition. And had a really, really great time and really happy over Isabella and her success. And that's kind of what's going on. I will be in Greenville, South Carolina, speaking on Thursday evening. So if you are out and about in that area and want more details, shoot me a note, because I don't actually know those details of where I'm going. I'll have to look them up. I don't even see the little book that tells me that information, but please look it up and or shoot me a note if you're in the greater Greenville, South Carolina area, and I will be down there speaking on Thursday evening. That is the plan. Once again, hope everybody is doing really, really well. There's John Blankenship and Colonel Buckshot and David Maxwell and David Penland. Hope everybody is having a great evening. And our friend Bobby Joe Goodson from Arkansas. I am going to be joined here this evening in just a minute by a special guest, and we're going to be talking a little bit about spies during the war. This person is a expert on the subject, and so if you've got any hard questions, please refer them to her here in just a moment. But please, everybody, extend a welcome to our friend MJ. MJ, how are you doing this evening?
I am well, Michael. How are you and the family?
Oh, I'm road weary.
Road weary. Well, I've run into many officers that have been a little road weary in my
Um,
time.
I'm road weary, but that's okay. Got me a little nap this afternoon, and I think I'm awake enough to have this conversation. Actually, it wasn't. It was supposed to be a little nap, and it didn't turn out that way. But
Ah,
we're excited to have you here in the library with us this evening, hanging out, chatting a little history. And tonight we're going to be talking about one of your favorite subjects, spies.
well, I do know a little bit about that. I'm not an expert by any means, but it's spies and espionage is an often overlooked aspect of the Civil War, and
It is. It
it's
is.
really interesting stuff to research and to learn about. So thank you for having me on here tonight and to connect with you and your folks. And uh, really, it's just like I said, it's often overlooked aspect, and to get some attention to it is always a good thing.
It is, and you're not the first person to say that. I had a conversation. I'm going to be speaking at an event at Pamphlet Park about like
Mm,
guerrilla warfare and things coming up in October. And the person putting that program on said there's not really anybody doing anything on spies. There's a lot of people writing about guerrilla warfare,
mm.
but not a whole lot of people writing about spies these days. So to really get started this evening, how did you become interested in that aspect of the war and that time period in general?
Well, I started my Civil War journey when I was about 8 years old. Um, I loved to read when I was a kid, just as long as when I first started reading. My mom got me the book by David Kintor, Lee and Grant at Appomattox,
Mhm.
and I read that book and I was hooked.
Right.
I found it very interesting. But what I found very interesting, now I'm, from upstate New York. I was very interested in General Robert E. Lee.
Right.
And just over time, I started to want to learn more about both sides. I personally believe that to be a good historian, an objective historian, you need to know both sides and to tell both sides without any personal bias.
Hmm.
So, just over the years, I just started studying more and, all the way through high school, and just really, I always wanted to go to Gettysburg. I kept telling my parents I wanted to go, but we just never got there. Um, and I actually didn't make my first visit till I was an adult in 2008. And the minute I stepped on that field, it forever changed my life. And I just wanted to pursue more about learning and becoming a historian. I also do a lot of photography. Well, I used to. I don't do as much as I used to, but so I would, be around different battlefields and in Gettysburg a lot and do photography. And I met a group of individuals from the Confederation of Union Generals. It's a Civil War living history group. And one of the gentlemen who I actually connected with also too on Facebook in
Hmm.
one of the Civil War groups, and we became really good friends. He became my mentor, like my big brother, and he portrayed General Winfield Scott Hancock of all people. And he had just said, you're very knowledgeable. Have you thought about portraying somebody? Let's get you into this. And I said, well, I really haven't, but and so we started kind of just, because he was very much into. He actually had a uh, uh, Civil War cipher. He was very interested in that aspect of the Civil War history. He would also talk about the Revolutionary, the Culper spy ring,
Hmm.
Washington spies. So I started reading about that. And then one night we were just talking. He said, "Oh my God, I've got it. Pauline Cushman." Because I did not want to do a typical portrayal of a woman like a and again, this is no disrespect to any of these individuals of history or anyone who portrays them, like a Clara Barton, like a nurse or something. I wanted to portray someone that was maybe a little bit against the grain, perhaps who didn't follow the rules. And he said Pauline Cushman, and I had heard of her, but not really didn't know much about her. And I looked her up, and he said you can portray her in her military role in a uniform, and the more I read about her, it just clicked. And that's how I got into it. And I enjoy telling that aspect of the Civil War in programs because so
Right.
many people don't know those stories. And
Yes.
it's so interesting and it's engaging. And you can hook people, even people that weren't into Civil War history that might just be passing through when we're doing a program or whatever, they become very interested. And also the kids love it too, because you can have, it was kind of funny, one event I did down in Bedford, Pennsylvania. We have a gentleman that portrays General Henry Hunt, the artillerist, and he was talking about the artillery, and the kids were enamored with me because I was a spy.
Right.
So I said, well, you can sit there and talk about, your artillery, but they want to hear about the danger. They want to hear about risking your life and almost getting caught.
Not that being an artilleryman was not risking your life, but
Absolutely. But these kids, they were just like, no, we want to hear her story. And
right.
it was just something that clicked. I have a very similar personality to Cushman.
Right.
It's kind of scary at times, actually. And that's how it really just got started. And like I said, it's just an overlooked aspect of the war because, without the scouting and the intelligence and the spies delivering information, a lot of your military campaigns wouldn't have come off as they did.
Right. Absolutely right.
So that's how I got into portraying her. She has a great story to tell. I don't think she was really, I'd say, obscure. But one thing I've kind of worked hard at is to try to bring her. She's not, when you think of Civil War spies, Belle Boyd,
Oh yeah.
okay, the teenage spy, or you think of Elizabeth Van Loo. They don't really at first say Pauline Cushman. So that to me was a challenge to engage people and really get them involved in her story. She has a great story to tell as well. And I tell it the full thing too. I when I research and no matter what I'm talking about, I seek to tell the whole story.
Right.
Cushman was not perfect. None of these individuals were perfect. And oftentimes I find that, and I'm sure you have too, Michael, and even the folks on here tonight, is that when we study these individuals, a lot of times we get lost in the stats in the
Hmm.
books and, just the numbers. These were real human beings and they were capable of the good, of the bad. They had their really good days, they had their bad days. I mean, you know, I do portray Cushman did some heroic things. She did risk her life. She also had, now she was a spy for the Union, but she also had some Southern sympathies
Right.
and had some relationships with Confederate folks. And also, too, later in life, she was an alcoholic. She also ended up accidentally overdosing in
Mm-hmm.
1893. She was mixing painkillers with whiskey,
Mm-hmm.
something I don't portray in a program. But so I seek to tell her whole story. And I do that with anyone that I'm talking about,
Right.
actually. So,
All right. And you mentioned a couple of those famous spies. I will throw in Rose Greenhow in there as well. Um,
mm,
Even though she is buried here in North Carolina, her story doesn't really connect that much to North Carolina. She was hanging out in Washington, D.C.
hmm.
Uh, and you're right. We don't, outside of maybe just a couple. Um, I went raiding my own bookshelves looking for spy books this afternoon and have a couple like Kane's Spies for the Blue and the Gray. And it's been a long time, very long time since I flipped through this book. But we don't talk about those people, and I think a lot of times, Elizabeth Van Loo was crazy, and Belle Boyd was a teenager, and Rose Greenhow died with all that gold sewn into her skirt,
I know
and
she
that's
sunk
about
right
the
into the
extent.
sea.
Yeah, that's about the extent of our stories when it comes to that part of their role in the war. Now, um, Elizabeth, I have to help me with this quote, but a very famous quote from the movie Gettysburg, when Harrison is a spy.
Thing about this job, you do it right.
If you do the job right, nobody knows that you're doing it.
Very hard on an actor.
And so it's I think, and Kern actually writes that in the book that most of these stories we'll never know, and even the stories we think we know, how much of that is really true.
That's a very good point, Michael, because as I've researched her over the years, people that are spies, they really, you know, they might have embellished a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Cushman actually co-wrote a book with a friend of hers. It came out before the end of the war. It was written in 1864, and you do have to take a little of embellishment with it.
Yeah.
Um, same thing with Belle Boyd's memoirs and
Yep.
things like that. So there's sometimes not a lot of information, or it's out there, but you have to really search for it and put the pieces together. So, and this is where you also discover these people. you know I found out that Cushman had a lot of Southern sympathy. She's actually from New Orleans, Louisiana. She was
Right.
born there in June of 1833. She lived there for about 10 years before her parents moved out to Grand Rapids, Michigan. She had two brothers that ended up fighting for the Confederacy. So she did have a connection to the South. And just like I had discovered an account, um, a couple of accounts. One of them is that she was noted as being seen in Braxton Bragg's headquarters in December of 1862 or nearby.
Mhm. Mhm.
So what I want to know, what was she doing there?
Right.
You know, what was she working with Braxton Bragg, and that's why he didn't hang her when she was captured as a Union spy in the summer of 1863, and he kept delaying her execution. Also, there was a letter I found from somebody writing to their family member about how, you know, John Hunt Morgan captures Cushman, and he was quite enamored with her,
Hmm.
and ended up that she spent the evening at the headquarters, and then he let her go the next morning. So what happened there? So
Right.
it's these pieces that you just don't know. And it's funny because you can also research all these individuals, and being a first person living historian, you have to pretty much know that individual's life like the back of your hand.
That's right.
And my first ever program that I did, which was actually 6 years ago yesterday at an event, someone asked me, well, Major Cushman, what was your favorite thing to steal? And I had a very quick moment of like, oh my God, that I've never found that. Like, she
Right.
never mentioned it. So then I said, well, how would Cushman answer this?
Right.
You know, and I just said, well, I can tell you what it was. It was those plans that I had in my boot that I was found with leaving Braxton Bragg's headquarters in June of 1863, because I was not supposed to have them. That's my favorite. And it was almost like she was speaking through me.
Right.
So people in my living history group, we have a little belief that these individuals of history pick the person to portray them.
Hmm.
And I think that somehow she reached out through time and space, just because we do have such, similar personalities. Like, she was not your typical 19th century woman. She wasn't hanging out at tea parties. She was hanging out with the boys, drinking, playing cards, having a good time. She grew up with, several brothers. She also befriended a lot of the kids in the Chippewa tribe out in Grand Rapids. So she grew up, she was like a tomboy, which she
Right.
never really outgrew. So, and they taught her how to shoot a gun, how to ride a horse, not side saddle, mind you, and to hunt and to fish and to track. So a lot of these things she's going to use later in life when she becomes a spy. So it's just one of those things. Like I said, she has an incredible story, but I'm always looking for that information. And there's the book her and her friend wrote, and there was another book which it's going to be about 20 years ago that was written. And the individual who wrote the book, he had told me that I will never find the name of her parents. It was
Hmm.
just not known.
Hmm.
And I did find the name of her parents last
Hmm.
year. So it's just, there's always that newer research that's out there. It's out there, and we have to just keep looking for it.
And that's a great, great thing. Of course, I say that all the time. You just got to keep digging, and you never know what you will find. Now, at some point, you have to, in my world, you have to stop and start writing. But you just have to keep digging. There was actually, when I turned in the Branch Lane manuscript, somebody, Joe Owens, had actually sent me a couple of accounts he found in a Texas newspaper about James H. Lane's brothers being killed. And I'm like on the phone or on the keyboard to my editor going, no, wait a minute, I got something I need to add.
Right.
And it wound up being like 4 sentences total, but it was a little piece of the story. And that's a great thing. If you are interested in digging deeper into these subjects, it never stops digging. You never
It
know what you're
doesn't.
going to find.
I agree with that. I'm working on 2 book projects myself, which I'm writing about Pauline Cushman,
Hmm.
because there's been a lot of newer research and things that I want to kind of set the record straight. And then I'm also, I've always been kind of drawn to study Winfield Scott Hancock. And I kind of picked up the torch when my mentor, Randy, who got me into living history, he passed of cancer few years ago, and I kind of picked up the torch to help tell his story.
Hmm.
And that's the thing, I'm always finding stuff, and like you said, it's like sometimes you go down that rabbit hole, or
Oh,
you
yeah.
find things, or you learn things about individuals. And just like he had a lot of Southern sympathies as well, which there's letters from men of his that are writing to Abraham Lincoln that telling him they don't want him to be a major general because they're afraid of him more than the Southerners.
Right.
So it's something that, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of work and a lot of research, but I love it. And I love telling these folks stories. It's how we have to keep them alive. And I love engaging people. I love creating that experience for
Yes.
people to just, when you see that light switch go on and they said, well, even if they're not really interested in history, like one of the greatest things that I love is especially the kids.
Hmm.
And I've done programs where even teenagers will come up to me after hearing a program or experiencing, like walking through our encampment and talking to different people, talking to me. They've got Pauline Cushman on their cell phone. They looked her up, they Googled her.
Mhm.
And I've had parents write to me that the kids have done projects on Cushman, written a paper on Cushman. They've dressed up with her for Halloween. And actually, Lee White, who works down at Chickamauga, had messaged me one time and he says, your doppelganger's here. I said, what are you talking about? And this little girl was in a military uniform as Pauline Cushman down at the Chickamauga National Battlefield.
That's awesome.
That's good.
And
I
that's
love when that happens.
it's just really something that's awesome. And anything can spark. I've had a lot of people come to me recently who watched the Apple TV series Manhunt,
Hmm.
which is about the Lincoln assassination and John Wilkes Booth. And my friend's daughter, who is a teenager, said, I want to learn more. What's the
That's
best
great.
book?
Yep.
I'm intrigued now. And so, that's what I say about like the movie Gettysburg and Glory and this TV series and these other little mini series. If it can get somebody interested in history, then that's a positive. It may not be completely historically accurate, but that's okay. It gets
It
folks
is.
interested.
It is.
And what you and I do as historians and trying to tell the stories and trying to be balanced historians as well. I have my favorites I like to study. I love studying Richard Garnett, and there's not a lot out there on him.
No.
I don't know what it is about him, but I've been intrigued. And, I actually found the letter that he had when Stonewall Jackson brought him up on charges after the Battle of Kernstown. So I love finding those tidbits of history. And, like I said, so many people are, especially on social media, there's ultra people on both sides.
Oh yeah.
And it's funny because I've actually had some very Southern, I had a very Southern guy message me on Facebook last year, the year before. And he said that Cushman was a traitor to Louisiana.
Hmm.
She should have been raped and hung, and that
Mhm.
I should be the same because I betray her. And I said, so you're upset at Cushman. I said, let's talk about Belle Boyd, who ended up marrying a Union officer. Well,
Yeah.
he didn't have an answer for that. He didn't even know that happened. So
There's a
it's-
long list. I mean, we could have a long list of women in the South who married Union officers. The daughter, I can't remember her name, but the daughter of the president of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, married a Union, I think a general after the end of the war, that she met, if I remember the story right, that she met while he was part of the occupation force. I'll have to look
it's
her name up. That's
it's
just one of those little
yeah,
stories.
it is.
And you're right, telling that, especially getting the kids, or especially getting the kids interested. And the living history is the way to do that. It really is. Um, I love books, as you know. I absolutely love books, but most kids are not going to be hooked. I know you were, but for me, it was going to that first reenactment 40 some years ago, over 40 years ago, and carrying that flag and feeling the ground shake when the cannons went off. That's what hooked me so many years ago, and so many kids are the same way. Places that I volunteer and that you volunteer, reaching out to I'll talk to a kid all day if they're interested. And try and answer their questions and feed them and do my best to show them that history really is cool.
It's cool and it's fun. And a lot of people say, I see it so many times, oh, kids aren't interested in history. Yes, there are. If you actually go to these events, and I'm sure you've experienced it, there's lots of kids. I mean, we have, when I'm in Gettysburg for the anniversary with my Living History group over in Unity Park, for the anniversary, there's tons of kids that are streaming through the encampment, that are trying on the uniforms, that are wanting to learn. And we actually have some of the kids of our members that get dressed up in period clothing, and they teach about what the kids did during the time of the Civil War. And it's just all very fascinating to them. And like you said, some people do need that personalized experience. And
Yep.
last fall, I helped with a fundraiser for the Civil War Museum up in Harrisburg. And some of my friends bought these raffle tickets where you could live fire a cannon at night.
Mm-hmm.
See, the guys in my living history group don't trust me with weapons, y'all. Okay. So I
Mm-hmm.
just want that to be known. Okay. They don't want me anywhere near any guns. So my friends gave me these tickets that they had purchased, and I won one of the live firings.
Mm-hmm.
So this kid, he was probably about 10 or 11 years old. He had been following me around the whole night, and he just kept talking to me about spies and espionage and Lee and Grant. And he was standing not far from me when I won this live firing. And I turned to him and his dad, and I gave him the ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And his dad said, "Are you kidding me?" And that kid was so excited because he had tickets as well. He was holding them in his hand, and he was all excited, hoping to win. And I gave him that live firing winning ticket. And his dad said, "You're going to give him the memory of a lifetime. Thank you
Yeah.
so very much." And a lot of people turned around and they said, "Wow, Major, that was such a classy move." I said, I wanted to give that kid an experience he's going to remember for the rest of his life. And who knows, maybe he'll become a historian one day,
Yep.
or even casually just visiting different historical places. So the kid got to do it. He was all excited, and they came up to me after, and he said, "Wow, that was so cool." So it's about creating experiences, because who's going to be telling the stories once we're gone? We
That's right.
need these people to come up and to carry on these stories,
We
because
sure
we
do.
can't live forever, unfortunately, and that's why we need to really instill it in our younger folks.
Yep. I agree. Some of us have got a little gray in our beards. So we need young people. I had that experience on Saturday morning. We stayed in Greensboro for National History Day, and this lady approached us. We were downstairs having breakfast, and this lady approached us and wanted to know if we were doing the History Day contest. And we said yes, and we talked to the mom for a few minutes. Well, then the daughter came up, and the daughter was just so excited about the whole thing. I think she'd done it last year.
This is her first year.
Oh, this was her first year.
And she wanted to do
And
it before, but she didn't
yeah,
have a teacher. and
she
wanted
wanted to do it before, but the teacher wasn't into it, which is regrettable.
Mm.
And this was her first year. She'd changed schools, and this was her first year of doing it. She was in 8th grade, and she won.
She was showing us pictures on her phone.
Yep.
She was so excited.
She was so excited. I'll see
Excellent.
her, should see her in Maryland in a month at the national contest. But she was so excited about being there and about history, and that it's just great to come across those people. I got one of those sitting right over there right now. You can't see her, but she's on the other side of the room. She just turned and waved. So
Well, you guys have done a fine job. And
there's just so many fascinating things out there to learn. So let's go back and talk a little bit more about Cushman.
okay.
Going up the chain of command, have you found references to who Cushman was working for?
She was mostly working for General William Rosecrans.
Okay.
A lot of the intelligence that she gathered was pivotal for the Tullahoma campaign.
Okay.
She was also doing a lot for Garfield as well. So I'm not really sure. Like I said, I don't know what happened with that thing in December of 1862 with Braxton Bragg. I tend to believe personally that I can't prove it, but I think she had her one side, and that was her own, because
Right.
it is. I mean, it's interesting because, like, one of the things she did when she first got into it, and how she got into it, was she was an actress. And one night she was down in Kentucky, which was a split state, and a couple of these Confederate guys that she knew wanted her to toast Jefferson Davis, and they offered her a bunch of money. And she was a single mom. She left her 2 little kids with the in-laws because her first husband had died, which that's an interesting story as well. There's reports that he died of illness after he came home from his aspect of the war. And then I found 2 accounts where he died of blunt force trauma after hanging out with Pauline. So we'll leave it at that. So, so she wasn't sure, and she went to the local provost marshal, and he said, well, maybe you can help us kind of find out who these Confederate sympathizers are. So she takes the money. She actually gets fired from the Playhouse for doing this because everyone thought she was a Confederate sympathizer and they wanted her out. And so she lost her job, and they said, well, how about you come work for us in the Secret Service?
Right.
So that's kind of how she got into it. And, some of the things she did where she was, staying at a boarding house, and she discovered that the owners of the boarding house were planning to poison some Union soldiers. So she turned them in and got them arrested. But yet she developed this friendship or some sort of relationship with John Hunt Morgan, the Confederate cavalryman. And, it's funny, because he had captured her a couple times, let her go. And then he's captured later on in the war, and he ends up at the Ohio Penitentiary. Mm-hmm. And he gets a visit from Cushman, and then not long after he escapes with some others. So I have to there's those things that I wish I knew more. I want to know more. But yeah, so she was working for Rosecrans. They were friends. He accompanied her on a lot of lecturing tours after she was outed as a spy. So she did a lot of charity work with the Sanitary Commission, and he would introduce her. So they had a close friendship.
So we need John Hunt Morgan to live a little longer and write his slightly embellished memoir after the war. All the rest
I'd
of them.
love to know. And it's sad because the book that her and her friend Sarmientino did, which it is a little embellished, definitely, but it's very sad because she writes. And this is right before Morgan is killed when she finishes the book, and she speaks very highly of him. And I almost felt sad for her that I said, well, your friend is not going to live very much longer than this. So It's very, very sad. So I think she just had her own side, and that's what I love portraying about her. She definitely wasn't a typical, Victorian woman of the time. She lived by her own rules. She did her own thing. She, and this extended past the Civil War. She ends up in the Old West a little bit later in life. She goes through 3 husbands. So the second one she marries in 1872, and he dies mysteriously a year later. So I have to wonder if there's like this Black Widow thing going on too. So, but I mean, she ends up out, her and her husband, her third husband, she ends up, doing a lot of business dealings, working. She ended up working as a bartender in a saloon. Can you imagine that? And this guy came in, and he got very drunk, and he started disrespecting a lot of people and disrespected her. And she said, you've got about 5 seconds to get out of my establishment. And he made some nasty comment towards her, and she pulled out her Colt revolver from the war, and she threatened to shoot him.
Right.
And he left, and then she ended up horse whipping a guy that disrespected her. So she didn't care. She threatened a newspaper guy who wrote an unfavorable story about her. So she just has a great story. And again, taking nothing away from the Bell Boyds and the Harriet Tubmans and the Mary Bowsers and the Rose Greenhouse. It's just, I like to see it when her story's out there more because it is so interesting.
Right. That's the great thing about history, and what we do is trying to take these little stories and teach the public. And I compliment you on that. And I know it's a hard task sometimes in the living history world to go out there and do different things and to portray different people.
I learned that. Yes, it was very. I'll be honest with you. My friend Randy had told me you're going to take a lot of crap because it is a male-dominated hobby.
Yes.
especially portraying a woman not traditional as a nurse, or bringing tea and hardtack around or
Mhm.
anything like that. And I mean, when I first got into it, yeah, I did face a lot of I call it nonsense.
Yeah.
But I found over the years that that's changed, and I earned respect.
Mhm.
The first year I was at Remembrance Day in Gettysburg doing Cushman, these two guys came up to me and they said, "If you think we're saluting a woman in a uniform, you're out of your mind." I said, "I'm going to get my car. Like, what are
Yeah.
you doing?" And it was just like they just went. I just walked away from them, because that's the best thing you can do, is walk away.
Yep.
And then the second year, I was walking up because my living history group gives a donation to the park every Remembrance Day for preservation. And I was walking up to the ceremony, and the number of reenactors that saluted me as an officer was amazing. And
Mhm.
they had heard of me. They had saw me on social media,
Mhm.
and they respected me. So, getting into it, it was a little tough, and that's what I do. But I've also had a lot of women come up to me or reach out to me that now they're reenactors.
Mhm.
Now they are doing non-traditional living history and reenacting. They're right in the ranks now, hiding their gender, like many of
Mhm.
the women did during the war. And they
They
said,
did.
because I inspired them to do that, and that I kind of just, wavered the storm. And that's one of the things that really is rewarding to me, that I could make that sort of an impact, and
Mhm.
not only tell Cushman's story, but, especially for the kids too. A lot of little girls will come up to me and say, "Wow, like, I could be anything I want to do." And I said, "That is very right. You can."
Right.
Um, so, and again, I've learned over the years to just kind of roll away from the haters, because they're out there, as you well know.
They
and
sure are.
and I've just learned they just like attention, and I just I just don't even pay attention to it really much anymore.
Try writing about Confederate history sometime
Mm.
if you wanna know about the haters. But
Well, it's
yeah.
fun though, because like people like Armistead
Uh-huh.
and Garnett, they don't get any hate for some reason when I post about them in a group. Now I can post about Stonewall Jackson and all the haters will come out. But
Yeah.
I think people are connected with the Gettysburg movie and feel
Yeah.
sympathy for them or something. I've always wondered that, if that was a key to it, because you don't nearly see the comments about them that you do, like if you bring up somebody else, like
Right.
you know, like Lee or Longstreet or Stonewall. So, but
Well, a whole lot of people out there think they're experts, um,
They stayed in the Holiday Inn.
because yeah, they stayed in the Holiday Inn Express last night.
and now they're
Um,
historian.
yeah, and, it takes more than just reading 2 or 3 books about
Mhm.
a subject. I'm not an expert. I mean, I learn
I'm not
something new every
either.
day. Um, and I'm constantly, challenging myself. I picked up the Spies book that I've owned for years and probably read like decades ago, and was rereading the introduction. It's like, well, I don't remember any of these people,
Well, it's
even though
funny
I
when
know I've
you
read the
can
book.
do that. You don't remember it,
No,
and it's always cool to kind of go back.
it is.
Um,
It
but
it is.
I
Uh,
think that's what it is that when you research about certain subjects like the Confederate side of the war and you present it, especially nowadays, like you said, everybody's an expert, but
yep.
you you just navigate it so well, Michael. And I've learned a lot from different historians that I'm friends with and I've talked to, that have been so gracious to me to kind of tell me, you know, always don't. Sometimes no response is the best response, and that's
That's right.
that's what I've learned. And even with spies and espionage, because I always try to tell people, just like the spy balloons, like nobody
Mhm.
ever talks about the spy balloons,
Mhm.
and they have a fascinating history. And then I
Yep.
found out too that like McClellan and Custer ended up going up in one, and Custer was scared to death.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Mm.
that side of that, and then the Bureau of Military Intelligence, and of course, the Confederate spy network, and, the secret messages and the
Yep.
coding and the encryption. It's so interesting, and
It is.
and that's one thing I'm going to add to my presentation later this year when I do events in Gettysburg, when we have our encampments, is that I'm going to start trying to, teach the secret codes to the kids and things like
Mhm.
that. And
Mhm.
maybe, have them try to send some with their friends. So
That's a great idea about getting young people interested. And like I said, history is, I've said many times, history is a multi-century experience, and hopefully, and not just young people, old people need that experience too. Us older folks need that experience too. But that's so true, to try and reach out and grab people. And
absolutely agree.
just teach people that, hey, you don't know it all, and I don't either.
That's
Um,
one thing I try to, somebody once said I was the guru on Pauline Cushman. I said, no, I'm not. And a lot of people too, I mean, these individuals of history, they're the true stars of the show. Okay. We're just here to tell their stories and to make sure their names are never forgotten.
you got it.
And that's what I feel with Cushman. I said, I do know a lot about her. I portrayed her for 6 years, and I've learned a lot from portraying her as well. That she left her third husband, who was the sheriff of Pinal County out in Arizona. He was abusive. He was a big jerk, and she just had enough of it and left. And that helped me in my own personal life, leaving,
Mhm.
a marriage that wasn't working for me. So
Mhm.
I owe her a lot, and I owe the fact that I have to tell her history, and I want to do it right. I want to do it so that it's engaging and it's fun for people to learn about her. And I really do wish those spies and espionage were a bigger thing,
Right.
because they are so interesting to learn about.
Right.
And I just wish there was, like, there's so many different conferences that they have, Civil War, conferences and meetings. And I would love to see one on spies and espionage.
Yep. I agree. Wholeheartedly agree. So, folks, if you've got any other questions for MJ, please drop them in the box. We will be glad to take a stab at those this
I
evening. Of
will
course, there's been
certainly try,
discussion.
indeed.
That's right. There's been discussion on Bell Boyd and John Wilkes
Mm.
Booth.
Oh,
Uh,
Bell Boyd. Oh, indeed. Yeah.
yes, and
Mm.
all kinds of interesting things to explore out
John
there.
Wilkes Booth. Cushman was friends with John Wilkes Booth. And
Is
that's another aspect that I'm trying to find out, whether she knew anything that was going on.
right?
Possibly they knew each other from the acting stage. She knew him and his brother Edwin. And like I said, there's just so much I want to learn.
Yep.
And it's out there. It's got to be out there. There's actually 2 trunks of hers that went missing right before she died. She had them shipped to Texas because she
Hmm.
was going to go stay with some friends in Texas. And then she passed, and these trunks have been gone ever since. So one of these days,
It'll show up in
God
somebody's
willing, if
attic.
something's going to show up and there's going to be something in it
Yep.
that
Fantastic.
because I also too, when I research, I just don't put anything into a program. I want to find the account of it at least multiple times. Like, for a
Yes.
long time, people had asked me, was Cushman wounded while she was doing her espionage? And she did her espionage in different ways. Sometimes, because she portrayed male roles when she was an actress, so she would actually get dressed up in a Confederate uniform and kind of blend in with the
Mhm.
Confederates. She also would, kind of go hang out with the Southern officers and get them drunk and, give them some
Mhm.
food and charm them a little bit. So, that's just one of those things that I've I just want to learn more.
Yes.
And I really do think that it's out there, and it's going to pop up somewhere, just somewhere it will. And I appreciate the folks coming on tonight, and chatting about these individuals, because they are so important, and their names and their stories, because they did do a lot
Yes.
for these military engagements. And that's one thing that I am forever grateful for the gentleman who got me into my role of living history, because he had me read of all the officers and infantry manuals and everything
Yeah.
else. And I said, well, Cushman wasn't an officer in the field. She was gifted a major's rank by Garfield and Lincoln, actually in the cavalry. She was quite the horsewoman for her service. And he said, I don't care. I want you to know the military operations like you were. And
Mhm.
that has helped me to learn the different aspects of the battles much better, like Gettysburg,
Mhm.
we were talking the other day about Chancellorsville.
Mhm.
I haven't been to Chancellorsville. I want to go down there. So it's helped me quite a bit as a historian understand. So, but again, where would some of these generals be without their spy and espionage folks?
That's right. Absolutely right. All right, folks. I don't see any other questions this evening. MJ, is there any book you would recommend if someone was interested in digging a little deeper?
On Cushman?
Well, on spies in general.
Spies in general. Lincoln Spies are very good. There's a couple books out about Jefferson Davis as well. There's also a good one on George Sharp and the Bureau of Military Intelligence as well.
Okay.
That's a very good book. Another book, if you're interested in the Gettysburg campaign, Tom Ryan did it, Spies, Scouts, and Secrets of the Gettysburg campaign. It covers both sides of that as well. So, but I also, too, you can try to find a lot of primary sources, the letters and newspaper accounts. If anybody has a newspapers.com, you can just type in Belle Boyd, you can type in Rose Greenhow or Pauline Cushman, and all of these things are going to come up to read the newspaper accounts of the day. And some of them are embellished, of course, but sometimes that's the challenge of separating fact from fiction.
That's right. Absolute challenge. So Joshua Shiver asked, is there any information regarding Thomas Laws from Clark County, Virginia? That is not a name I'm familiar with, even though I am kin to the Laws family. But
I am not familiar with that.
No, Joshua, if you want to send me a note about what you know, and I can try and look into that and maybe turn it into a post for Looking for the Confederate War. I'll be happy to try and do that and see what
I'm interested too. So when you I'll be looking for that post. So I'm always looking to learn too.
I mean, hey, I wrote a post about a Confederate airplane the other day, so I'm sure we can throw in more spy stuff.
Absolutely. And about the spy balloons, they had them on both sides, and the Union spy balloons, they were calling those, Lincoln's Air Force. They were referred to as that. And I said, wow, so I hadn't heard that reference before. So, but there's all these little stories too, and they're just as important.
Yep. That's all right. It takes a whole lot of little stories to make one big story.
It's a puzzle piece, and I appreciate you asking me to come on here tonight.
Sure.
And I've enjoyed it. And, I always thank people for their support too in any of my endeavors. And if y'all have any questions on Cushman or spies or espionage, you can find me on Facebook.
Yep.
I'm also on Instagram as well, but I'm under Major Pauline Cushman. So
awesome.
One of my many aliases.
When will you be at Gettysburg this summer?
Well, I will be at Gettysburg this summer. I am actually going to be down there Memorial Day weekend. We have an encampment over at the Heritage Center. Mm-hmm. And then I'm there for several days. We're going to do the anniversary event, but it's going to be a couple days after the anniversary. I'm going to be there the 5th through the 7th in Unity Park. We lined it up with the reenactment that weekend. So
awesome.
So I will be there. So if anybody's in Gettysburg, come on over to Unity Park. The good Major Cushman would love for you to come up and introduce yourself and to share any history or any questions that I can answer. And
awesome. All right, folks. Well, thank you, MJ, for joining us here on Sunday Night History Chat. It's been a real treat, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. Once again, if you got any questions or whatsoever about this later, go to michaelchardy.com and use the contact form, because I don't always circle back around to Facebook or to YouTube, wherever it is I am tonight. I don't always come back. So drop me a note there. And if you can't find MJ and have a question for her, use that contact form and I will make sure that she gets it. So MJ, thank you for joining me. Everybody else, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Y'all have a great week. Keep researching, checking out history, sharing history, because that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely. So without any further ado, y'all have a great week and God bless.